few years, she has been exploring the idea of regeneration for thriving and flourishing of all life on Mother Earth and the contributions that Indic knowledge systems can make for universal well-being. She has also designed and run a course on regenerative leadership and is facilitating organizations to embed principles of regeneration in their design and practice. I now request the coordinator of the Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, Dr. Komal Agarwal, and convener of Haritkram, Ms. Jyoti Vaishne, to welcome Suparna ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Next panelist joining us is Mr. Sunil Harsana. Mr. Sunil Harsana, born in a village named Mangar, is an environmental activist who has been working towards conserving the region's nature for around past 2 decades. He is the founder of the Mangar Eco Club created in 2015. Despite his disease, his work and dedication towards the Mangar Eco Club and the forest and its conservation are appreciable. He is a researcher and a dedicated conservationist who is devoted to safeguarding South Haryana's Aravali's forests and wildlife. In the year 2011, he started a campaign to save sacred Mangarbani forest area from a development project proposed by the government and has proved to be a torchbearer for many people. He is a part of the Coexistence Fellows 2022 cohort and working on human-leopard coexistence in the Aravali's of southern Haryana. I now request Mr. Naman Jain and Madam Jyoti Vaishne to welcome Mr. Harsana.
Now, I request Gaurav, student member of Haritkram, to felicitate Dr. G. Arindran from WWF India. I request student coordinator of the national seminar, Ms. Avni Bhutani, to felicitate Madhusudan ji from IGNCA. Okay. And Ravi.
So we have a joint felicitation of Madhusudan ji and Ravi ji, and I request my colleague Sir Chetan Katoch sir to please come and felicitate them.
This day is not only significant and worth celebrating because it is Earth Day and we are holding this national seminar on a very pertinent topic, but because this day will become memorable for one more reason. The Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and Shahid Bhagat Singh College are signing a memorandum of understanding for collaborative research and academic activities for the next 3 years starting today. For this, I would request Professor A.B. Shukla from IGNCA and Professor Arun Kumar Attri, Principal of Shahid Bhagat Singh College, to step forward for the MOU exchange. Thank you so much, dignitaries. Now we hand over the floor to Professor Shukla. Please, sir.
So firstly, I request my old friend, Professor Ganti Murthy, to do his presentation.
Namaste,
We
sir.
start the whole thing, get kicking.
Namaste, everyone.
So Ganti Murthy ji.
Sir, namaste, sir. So, how much time do I have? Just to. I hope I'm audible.
Murthy, I think 20 minutes will be enough. Are you
Sure,
on
sir.
board?
No. Whatever you say, sir. आप जो बोलेंगे सही
I
है.
think 20 minutes good enough. They are
Sure.
more speakers, 20 minutes good enough time.
No,
In
yeah,
case
I'll try to finish it in 15
anything.
minutes. So I'll finish it in 15 minutes.
Okay.
And can somebody enable me to share the screen, please?
Yes, you can. Please share. Please share.
Excellent. I hope my screen is visible to you all. Excellent. Namaste, everyone. Matrubhyo Namaha, Pitrubhyo Namaha, Gurubhyo Namaha, Sabhai Namaha, Sabhapatibhyo Namo Namaha. My humble pranams to everyone there, and especially our mentor and the beginner of the IKS division, Shri A.B. Shuklaji. Sadar Pranam, sir, and Sadar Pranam to everyone there. And it's indeed a pleasure to be speaking to you, but unfortunately there was some mix-up, so therefore I could not be present there in person. I request humble apologies from you all. I offer my humble apologies to you all and request your indulgence with my online presentation. So today I was looking at the event and what kind of things that were planned, especially around this kind of 22nd April, we know Earth Day and all. And what is a Bharatiya model for that? I mean, what is a Bharatiya viewpoint on the Earth Day is essentially something that I'm going to talk about. Essentially, I'm going to talk about the Loka Sangraha, which is one of the very key concepts of Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, which talks about how do we really think about our personal behaviors and social behaviors in the world, and what is that relationship, and how do we really have to have that kind of a personal accountability when we talk about living in a world. And essentially that's where the Loka Sangraha comes. And then I would talk about, again, we all know that when we talk about the entire Earth Day, one of the reasons that we celebrate Earth Day is because in 1970 there was that big oil spill near Santa Barbara, and then after that essentially took off as something to really celebrate the Earth, the only planet that we have, as Carl Sagan, when the Voyager took a picture of our Earth from basically the edge of the solar system, all we saw was a pale blue dot. And that's essentially what we are. We are on a speck of dust in the entire universe. And that is the only home we have. We don't have a plan B. This is a plan A. That is the only plan that we have. And when you look at the current models that we have of development, it is very, very apparent that these are all unsustainable and in direct conflict with nature. In fact, a very first report about this kind of a trajectory, especially the consumption-based trajectory, which is essentially the Western model of development, the capitalist model of development. We even in 1972, the Club of Rome, they came up with one note called "The Limits to Growth." That was one of the first reports about the unsustainable trajectories of development that we are talking about and how it is in direct conflict with nature. And even after a 30-year update of that, that came out in 40-year update of it, which came out in 2012. The authors found that some of the authors who were there, one of them, two of them had passed away. The third author, he was leading that entire effort. And then during the 40-year update, they found that the trajectories, essentially the consumption patterns, the use patterns of all the resources had actually become worse. They were not really moderated in any sense. They actually were becoming worse. At the same time, though, we also need access to clean energy source, clean water, food, because this is a big challenge because we have to have these basic requirements for life. And if you look at the healthcare, it has become so impersonal, and it is much more about the treatment of a disease and less about prevention of diseases. Again, this is where the Bharatiya idea of health is not the focus. And so and when we think about all of these current models, or whether we're talking about economic development, environmental issues, challenges, access to clean water, food, and energy, and healthcare, and when we think about all of these, we see that the current models, whether we talk about it as a capitalist or a socialist or the communist models, they're all failing or have failed. Communist models have already failed, and capitalist models are already failed, all also looking like they're failing. Then what is really the answer? So India, does Bharat have any response to that? So in that case, when you think about it, we at the Indian Knowledge Systems Division and reflect the consensus essentially among most of the community scholars that there is an Indian way that is both sustainable and thrives for the welfare of all. In fact, the very Dheya Vakya, or the motto of our division, which was coined during Shri A.V. Shukla sir's tenure here, was Bhadrayam Sumatau Yatema. That means essentially, let us strive for a wisdom which work for the welfare of all. And therefore, it is imperative that we understand our heritage and demonstrate what is this Bharatiya way of doing things. And when we talk about it, and it's not just about humans that we are talking about, it's not the very anthropocentric worldview that we are talking about here. We are talking about the entire world. That means it encompasses all the living and non-living things of the world, and all life forms. And if you look at the kind of limits that we have reached, we have already are out of what can be said as a tolerable limit in terms of the biodiversity loss that we are having. The nitrogen cycle, more than 80% of the entire nitrogen that is cycled in the world today is essentially because of the human activity. And same thing is happening with the phosphorus activity, whether you're talking about climate change in terms of the greenhouse gas emissions, whether we are talking about ocean acidification, or whether we are talking about phosphorus cycles, or whether we are talking about any other resources like the use of fossil fuels, we are really out of whack here. And this essentially is, the changes here are at such a level that they are impacting the global cycles and are impacting our future as well. So what is really the solution? There, I mean, that's where the Bharati, again, the Jnana Parampara comes in, and then from the wisdom from the Panchatantra, the lion makers. The first thing that we need to be ensuring is first do no harm. Let's not create problems that are bigger than the solutions that are bigger problems than the problems that we are trying to solve. And what does that really mean in the whole context? That means we need to be thinking about Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, and because a few things, because it provides a unique perspective, is holistic in its approach, is inherently multidisciplinary, and provides many innovative approaches. And I will talk about a very few things today. And then the question comes, what is really this Bharatiya Jnana Parampara that we are talking about? What is this Indian knowledge system that I'm referring to here? And when you really think about it, essentially it is the Jnana, Vijnana, and Jivana Darshana of the people of Bharat, which has continuously arisen because of the experience, deep experiences, observations, experimentation, and rigorous analysis, which with a tradition of actually validating all of these experiences and putting it into practice across all domains, whether it be education, arts, law, justice, health, manufacturing, commerce, and arts, folklore, everything, and is documented in classical and other languages of Bharat and has been transmitted through textual, oral, and artistic tradition. So it is not only limited to text or Sanskrit or only one area like mathematics. It actually includes every aspect of things: Jnana, Vijnana, and Jivan Darshana. What does that really mean? What does that really mean in terms of actually actualizing this thing? So when we talk about these kind of things, when we talk about the parampara, so when we talk about the Jnana, Vijnana, and Jivan Darshan, there are three aspects to this. The Jivan Darshan is essentially like the epitome of the Bharatiya Drashti that is there. And then the Jnana is that knowledge, body of knowledge that we have accumulated, and that is transmitted through our parampara. And the Vijnana is essentially the practical utility of this, the implication of that Jnana in our lives. So essentially, the big canvas is that Jivan Darshana, on which we have the Jnana, and then from which we get the Vijnana. So when we talk about the Parampara, when we are talking about the transmission of knowledge, so it really has three aspects again. It talks about preservation of knowledge. So we talk about preservation of knowledge, whether we are talking about preserving our manuscripts, preserving our artistic traditions, preserving our cultural heritage, and a lot of these practices that are there, art forms, all of these things are essentially about preservation. And we keep talking about how we were so good in math, astronomy. For example, we were the first ones to discover the Pythagoras theorem here, maybe 500 years before Pythagoras. We talk about how we discovered the heliocentric model of the Earth or the universe, maybe 400-500 years before Copernicus. We talked about how we have discovered Pascal's triangle, so-called Pascal's triangle, 1,000 years before Pascal actually discovered it in our Chanda Shastra in Pingalas, things like that. But then when you think about all of that, these are all at the Vijnana level, at the practical knowledge level, or even sometimes at the Jnana level. But what is very, very important in all of this that we should not forget is that the drishti, the perspective of looking at the world in the way that we need to be looking at, that Jivana Darshana is actually the most critical part. It's the kernel which we need to preserve. And then the Jnana and Vijnana become more important. So whenever we talk about preservation, we should not only be talking about manuscripts and artistic forms, but we need to be talking about that Jivana Darshana, the perspective, the Bharatiya Drishti, which is very important. And when we talk about preservation, we also have to talk about the transmission aspect of things. Because when we talk about transmission, this is something that we need to keep in mind, that the methods of transmission will change with the generations, because the methods of transmission for knowledge, the methods in which we have taught our students cannot be the same. What it used to be 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 200 years ago, we cannot use the same methods today. We have many technologies have evolved and things like that. So we need to be identifying ways in which we evolve and adapt to the times of how we transfer the knowledge. So this is something that we need to be keeping in mind, so that it is responsive to the aspirational youth and the generations that we have, aspirations of the generations to which we want to transfer this knowledge. And then finally, whenever we talk about preservation or parampara, there are three aspects: the preservation, the transmission, and the creation aspect, because creation is inherent part of the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. Because when we talk about the parampara, we are talking about the flow of knowledge. When we talk about flow of knowledge, it cannot be stagnant. It cannot be something that is basically static, and we are going to study only the texts that were written some 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 1500 years ago, and that's about it, without any contribution to new knowledge. So that is not the case. In fact, we have to understand that a stagnant pool of water is essentially like a parampara without creation, and that stinks. A Jnana Parampara, we refer to Jnana Parampara as Ganga Pravaha, Ganga Dhara. Why is that? Because there is a flow of knowledge. There is preservation, transmission, and creation. And therefore, IKS is not really history studies. And it is not simply limited to Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, Bhagavad Gita, or Hindu studies. It actually encompasses so much more. And so we need to be thinking about Parampara, these three aspects. And why are these three things important? Is because, again, that kind of bringing that entire Indian knowledge systems aspects to the whole application in the world. We talk about Drishti, which talks about what makes this knowledge Indian. When we talk about knowledge systems, we are saying Indian knowledge systems. What makes this knowledge system Indian? When we talk about mathematics, Indian mathematics, what makes that knowledge system Indian? What makes that chemistry Indian chemistry? That essentially is a drishti. And parampara is, again, as I mentioned, talks about preservation, transmission, and creation. And the laukika prayojana, the practical utility, not to be talking about some past things, but actually to solve current and emerging problems of India and the world. And so we at the Indian Knowledge Systems Division of the Ministry of Education work on rejuvenating and mainstreaming Indian knowledge systems for the contemporary world. Our vision objective is to decolonize the Indian mind by generating interest and healthy critical reverence for the unbroken knowledge traditions of Bharata for the welfare of all. And what is that drushti I have been referring to? If you look into it, essentially, this is when we talk about reality, for example, in Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, the Bharatiya Drushti is to look at it at three levels. We look at it at Adhibhautika, the physical plane, Adhidaivika, the mental on the ideal level, and then Adhyatmika, the spiritual plane. So anything that we look at it at three levels. So three levels of reality for us. And then what is the endeavor for which we all endeavor in our lives? Essentially, the goals of our life essentially are called the Purushartha. Why should we strive? What should we strive for? Essentially, these are the four Purusharthas, or Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And if you look at it, Artha and Kama are called Aparadharma because they pertain to this world. And then the Moksha is called the Paradharma. Most often when we talk about Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, people restrict to only to the Moksha, the fourth Purushartha. But the Artha and Kama are very, very important. Why? Because this is where the context of today's basically topic in the seminars, workshops topic becomes very relevant for this context, because we are talking about this world. So when we talk about Artha and Kama, we want to make sure that it is within the chakra or the framework of the Dharma, so that the four Purusharthas can be attained. And then, of course, the four stages of life, the four ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa. This essentially is the way that we look at the world, because this is that Jivana Darshana that we have. We look at reality at three levels. We look at the four goals of life and four ashramas, four stages of human life. And when we look at it like that, this gets reflected in all our ethos. Wherever we talk about, even when we talk about the environment and nature, this is essentially becomes part of that. For example, if you look at the Ishavasya Upanishad, it starts off with this. It's in fact called Ishavasya Upanishad because it starts off with this verse that says, Ishavasya midagam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjidha magrudah kasvasiddhana. It says, Ishavasya midam sarvam. There is divinity in every particle of this universe. Yatkincha jagatyam jagat, every particle of the universe, tena tyaktena bunjidha. Therefore, enjoy with a sense of detachment. So, what this Bharati Jnana Parampara is telling you is not a sense of nihilism. What it is talking about is a conflict with nature, but it is talking about thriving with nature. And in fact, if you look at the Bhagavan Shiva's Nataraja Murti, where you have the Shiva as a dancer, the cosmic dancer of Nataraja, that essentially is an epitome of this thought process, which talks about Ishavasya Medagam Sarvam. Because you see, just like you cannot separate a dancer from the dance, and the dance emerges from the dancer and goes back into the dancer. You cannot separate these two. Similarly, the creator and the creation cannot be separated. They are one and the same. They comes and then goes into the same dancer. In fact, this is not something very unique to only this thing. In fact, if you go to Arunachal Pradesh, there also they say, Doni Opolo Donio Polum Ome, which is basically that we are children of the sun and the moon. And in fact, kind of echoing what the Shruti says, Mata Prithvi Putroham. And all the traditions recognize that we're not superior to anything. We are part of the nature. We have to thrive with nature. And all the living and non-living things are connected. And the conservation of nature, therefore, becomes as important as protecting one's own life. In fact, you must have heard about that very famous verse, right? Ahimsa paramo dharma. That verse actually occurs not in the context of humans. Actually, it occurs in the context of ethical treatment of animals in Mahabharata's Anushasana Parva, where it is talked about as ahimsa paramo dharma, ahimsa paramo dhamma, ahimsa paramam dhanam, ahimsa paramam tapah. As I said, that this is essentially ahimsa for the not injuring the animals is something that is considered to be the epitome of dharma. It is considered to be epitome of tapa, and basically it is also considered to be something the best way to actually do things in terms of what we practice in terms of becoming morally right and upright things. So when we talk about such a drishti, what does it lead to, practically speaking? This is all very good and fine. These are all philosophical discussions where we are talking about the drishti and things like that. What does it practically mean? When you think about what it practically means, it has some profound consequences. Just look at, I will give you one or two examples and then you'll be able to understand. Let us talk about the economic system, because I was referring to that earlier in the talk. So if you look at the capitalist systems today, I mean, there are two main things, right? Capitalist systems and social systems, socialist or communist systems. So if you look at the capitalist system, what does it talk about? It talks about something called as a Shuddha Labh. You have to maximize your profit. That's essentially the concept. You have to maximize the profit regardless of whatever else there is. So how do you maximize profit? So it talks about only Shuddha Labha. Then what is the consequence of Shuddha Labha? If I'm pursuing only profit maximization, this could have worked during the time of Adam Smith in 17th century when he wrote The Wealth of Nations, which is the foundational text for the capitalistic entire thought process. And if you look at it at that time, the human population was a fraction of what we have today. And the natural systems were so large that even expansion of the human population by twice or thrice did not really have a big impact at that time. But now, today is not the case. So we have a human population that is breaching the boundaries of what nature can provide us. In fact, if you read about some of the surveys, if everybody lived like a Westerner, like a West Europe or North American person, we would require about 3.5 Earths to sustain them. We don't have 3.5 Earths. We have only one Earth. So that's essentially a kind of resource utilization intensive growth rate that we are talking about when we talk about capitalistic systems. And what does that lead to? When we are talking about profit maximization, I don't care about other humans. I have to just maximize my profit. In fact, if you look at the company law, it is illegal to do anything other than maximize the profit of the company. That is a kind of economic system that we have developed. And what will be a consequence of such an economic system? The natural consequence will be that there will be inequalities. There will be people with a lot of money. There will be people with very less money. And this is essentially what will happen as a mathematical certainty. And this not only, if you look at US today or many of the developed, so-called developed economies, you'll see this kind of unequal inequalities in the society. You will see, if you go to San Francisco, you'll see people, homeless people on the streets in the downtown. And you'll also where some of the billionaires live. And that is a natural result of a purely capitalistic thought process. And if you look at what happens, what was the society's reaction to that? If you look at when did Karl Marx come up with his society theory of communism and all that, it was in 18th century England, when this kind of capitalist systems were leading to a lot of exploitation of the workers and things like that in England, London. He was sitting in London and then looking at the society, and then he came up with all his theories of communism and socialism. So what was so pendulum had swung to one end where it said Shuddha Labh, only profit maximization. So what was the other end? So the other end was Shunya Labh. They said no profit. No, nobody will own anything. Everybody, this assets will be seized and it will be managed by this Soviet, essentially, that community. That's all. And there will be no profit. What will be the consequence of such a system? Theoretically, it sounds very good, very egalitarian. But actually, practically, what happens is that it will lead to, again, exploitation of many by a small group of people. and dictatorships. And again, it will kill the entrepreneurship and innovation. And you are seeing that. We have seen that in USSR. We are seeing that in China. It will lead to the kind of dictatorships. So are these the only models that are there? Can we, what did India had been one of the economic superpowers for about 1500 years? What did we come up with? What was our model of economic development? Which we did not talk about natural exploitation of the nature, but something else, which talked about thriving with nature. Our model was Shubha Labh. It was not Shuddha Labh, which is capitalism. It was not Shunya Labh, which is communism and socialism. It was Shubha Labh. The Labh. So the idea was you go for your profit, you earn your profits, but at the same time ensure the Shubha or the welfare of your workers, welfare of your society that you're working in, and welfare of the nature. So you thrive with nature. The Shubha Labh concept of Bharat is a model that can be used for what we call a sustainable development today, and will meet the needs of everybody and promote social harmony. There are inherent checks within that kind of a system which will prevent this kind of the exploitation of the nature or the people and animals and other living things on the earth. This is the kind of holistic approach that we are talking about, that is grounded in reality that we are talking about when we talk about the differences in the Bharatiya Jivan Darshana that can have profound societal impacts, profound implications, and actual implementation of things. And what is the other thing that we can think about? Another example that I want to give you is think about what we are talking about today as our agriculture. When we look at our agriculture, industrial agriculture, especially after 1945, we are using so much of fertilizers, pesticides, and weedicides, and a lot of chemicals that we have actually made our soils into sandy. And it is a global phenomena where the soil organic matter is reducing quite a bit because of the repeated and overuse of fertilizers and pesticides, especially the fertilizers. And overuse of pesticides is causing a lot of pest resistance and is also causing a lot of cancers and a lot of diseases. And even the kind of high yield varieties that we are using are causing a lot of lifestyle diseases as well. They are one of the causes. In fact, there was a recent paper in 2023 November, based on a 2019 field study by 3 universities, where they showed that the hybrid varieties are losing their ability to take up the nutrients, micronutrients from the soil. There is a paper that is called, titled as Silent Famine. You can look it up. So what is India's answer to that? Do we have to go only that way? I'm not talking about, so one very quick solution would be to go the organic agriculture way. But is that the only way? Indians did not really follow organic agriculture. They followed what is known as a Paramparika Krishi, Bharatiya Paramparika Krishi, in which they took what is today called as a systemic approach in agriculture for the system. So when they did not look at plant in isolation, they looked at plants, microbes under the soil, in the soil, and the soil itself, the water, the plants, animals, and the human beings, all of them as together, and even the pests as one system. And they did not talk about killing pests, they talked about managing pests. They did not talk about basically grasping everything, grabbing everything from the soil and then making it infertile. They talked about nourishing the soil and maintaining the soil that is healthy. They talked about crop diversification, multiple cropping systems. They talked about how do we enrich the soil with a lot of inputs that are based on organic matter, but then processed in such a way that they actually enrich the microbial diversity in the soil, leading to a very, very healthy soil, which actually resulted in a system of production that exceeded what is possible even today. In fact, there are Shilasasanas, basically the epigraphs you can find in some of the Kaveri Delta region, where they were able to produce about 14 to 15 tons of paddy. Today, even with the best technology, we can produce around 12. And that is the kind of thing that we are talking about. And fortunately, there are so many ways in which we can use our Paramparika Jnana, or the traditional knowledge, to have a life that celebrates life. Because the Bharatiya Jivan Drishti is something that says, we are not talking about not living the life properly. We are talking about celebrating life in all its pluralistic forms, all its diverse forms, so that how the answer is all the way that we look for is always to thrive with nature and not really control the nature. In fact, that is also reflected in the way that we talk about knowledge. If you look at the famous, very famous English quotation about knowledge, we say knowledge is power. Why? Because knowledge is power to dominate the nature, because nature is looked at as the other that has to be dominated and controlled. In fact, the entire thought process of whether we talk about science, economics, or any of the social sciences, all of these disciplines that have the Western Jivan Darshana in their core will be talking about dominating the nature, controlling the nature. And because knowledge is looked up, therefore, as power to control the nature. What was the Bharatiya perspective? There is nothing more pure than knowledge. The knowledge is looked at as a purifier. Something that actually you have to think that the knowledge is looked up as a fire that purifies. Knowledge is looked at as a purifier that will help in integrating and then basically burning the sense of duality that is there. So the idea is somebody who is very knowledgeable from a Bharatiya perspective, the Jnana or the Pandita will be looking at the entire nature as one's own. Whereas when we talk about knowledge as power, the one with knowledge will have the power to control and dominate the nature when you look at it from a Western perspective. So think about the profound differences and actual meaning and actual practical things that we will be getting to if we use Bharatiya perspective. And I will finish off with one or two final slides where again I will talk about this Loka Sangraha, this beautiful concept of Loka Sangraha. All of these things that I have talked about are coming from the beautiful concept of Loka Sangraha, where in for example in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says Karmanaiva hi sansiddhit astitha janakadaya Loka Sangraha mevapi samparshan kartumarhasi. The idea is to follow the Swadharma. What is the dharma for the nature, Swadharma for the human beings, to make sure that we thrive with nature. And then at the same time, follow the Nishkama Karma. The idea is let us do something for the nature without expecting anything in return, because we are essentially in the end, we are doing what is the best thing for the nature is also going to be the best thing for us. And that essentially is the concept of Loka Sangraha, that is doing the Swadharma with Nishkama Karma. It is also called multiple things in multiple places. It is also called Rashtra Sangraha in Manusmriti. It is also called Loka Sangraha in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Ultimately, all of these things, when you pursue the dharma and artha and kama within the framework of dharma, will naturally lead to moksha. This is also the Dheya Vakya of our Ramakrishna mission. Atmano mokshardham jagat hitaya cha. For the pursuit of moksha for myself and the hita of the welfare of the world. And again, Mahamana said something very, very important. I saw this when I went to BHU there. He says, when we talk about all of this, please note that we are not talking about living in poor, desolate conditions. We are talking about a glorious civilization where we will be living life to the fullest. He says, Paap deenata daridrata aur dasata paap prabodije swadhinata mite sakala santa. So the point is, we need to be thinking about Swadhinata, this Atmanirbharata, whenever we talk about all of these things. So maybe this is the time for us as Indians to not only talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat in terms of the manufacturing of goods, but also Atmanirbhar and Swadhin Bharat in terms of our thoughts as well. With that, and I hope you can take away a few things, that Indian knowledge systems provides a unique perspective, is holistic and innovative in its approach, looks at three levels of reality: Adhibhautika, Adhidaivika, and Adhyatmika. 4 Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. 4 Avasthas. Basically, your Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyasa, and talks about Swadharma, Nishkama Karma leading to Loka Sangraha for the welfare of the world. And that essentially is Atmano Moksharnam Jagathitaya cha. With that, I'll stop here, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to share a few of my thoughts with you all. And thank you so much. And I again apologize for not being able to be there in person. Namaste.
Thank you, Professor Murthy,
Yes,
for
sir.
these remarks. And I think we shall reserve questions for the end of the session. So now I shall request another panelist, Professor Pankaj Jain, to his talk. And Professor Ganti Murthy, you shall wait for the questions That
Yes,
is
sir. I will wait for the question, sir.
right. So let us hear Professor Jain.
I have a presentation to show you. So it's focusing on Jainism. Okay. Next, please. Next. Next. Okay. Okay, so I'll try to cover these topics in quick succession. Next, please. So if we talk about environmental problems in India, we are all aware of all what's going on in India and across the world: assault on land, loss of forests, industrial pollution, unplanned urbanization, large-scale projects, and river pollution. We don't have to repeat. I mean, we know pretty much. But these were very similar to what was happening in the US in 60s and 40s. Next, please. So from one perspective, we can see India full of environmental issues. Another perspective is from National Geographic Survey that was done in 2008 to 2014. And each time when they measured the per capita carbon footprint, Indian as an economy, India as a country came at the greenest level. So despite all those problems that we saw in the previous slide, if we measure the carbon footprint based on our housing needs, dwelling sizes, transportation habits, food habits, and consumer goods, our per capita carbon footprint is still at the lowest level, lower than China, lower than many other countries, Brazil, and of course, many other European countries and America and so on. Why our carbon footprint are still so low despite 1.4 billion people that we have in this country. Next, please. So one reason, I'm going really fast because I know that a lot of speakers lined up. One reason probably we can see why we turned from animal sacrifices that were going on 3,000 years back, from those animal sacrifices to completely vegetarian diets. Not completely vegetarian diet, but India is the only country in the world that can boast of at least almost 40% of Indian people, Indian resident Indian citizens who are at least partially vegetarians, if not fully vegetarian. Even if people are eating meat, they're not eating meat like thrice a day. What goes on in European or American countries, Western countries is pork in the breakfast, beef in the lunch, and more meat in dinner. That's not happening in a country like India, where meat could be an occasional dish, but not a habitual dish. We're not addicted to meat. So why that turn from meat consumption to vegetarianism happens? One reason could be because of the influence of Buddhism and Jainism and how they emphasize non-violence and vegetarianism more than 2,500 years ago. Now, if we take a deeper look on Jain cosmology, we see that the Jain, thank you. In the Jain universe, in the Jain cosmology, that's fine. Because of the rebirth cycle, and that is common in Hinduism and Buddhism also, because of the rebirth philosophy, rebirth ideology, rebirth idea, all the species in the universe are interconnected. How many species we have in the universe on this planet? Modern science says 8.7 million. And all Indian philosophy says 8.4 million. We are very close. So if we lose this opportunity as human being, if we can't achieve our moksha this time, our soul will be lost, may be lost in this recycle of soul among 8.4 million species from Indian perspective, or 8.7 million species according to modern science. So because of the rebirth, all the species are now interconnected with this one cycle in this one cosmos, in this one planet. Next, please. So what Jains did more than 2,500 years ago, what they did is that they came up with a unique taxonomy of all the beings in the universe. So since humans have the intellect, have the intuition, have the self-control, self-regulation to live, they can choose how they can live. They can choose what they want to eat. But compared to other species, still they kept humans equal to gods, demons, mammals, reptiles, and birds. So all the five senses beings, the beings with five senses, touch, taste, smell, see, and hear, are all equal. So from Jain perspective, to survive on this planet, if you're killing an animal, if you're killing a mammal or a bird or a reptile, that is like cannibalism. That is equal to killing a human being. So how should humans live? Humans should live by consuming only one touch beings. The immobile beings, they have only one sense of touch only. What are those beings? Earth. Earth is a living being from Jain perspective. Water is a living being from Jain perspective. Fire is a living being from Jain perspective. Air, Nigoda are amoebas, like one cell beings, and plants. So only those beings are to be consumed by Jains and by all human beings. That's the teaching from Jain perspective. So even though those are living beings, so if you hurt earth, that is also violence. If you hurt water, fire, or air, that is also violence. So how should you live? Should live even minimizing the violence against fire and air and water and earth. So Jain monks, you might have seen in India, as they're walking on the earth, they're being very careful. They don't want to hurt even earth. So they will not wear leather shoes or leather chappals or leather sandals. And as they walk, they clear the land so that even accidentally they should not step on a living bug or microbe or reptile or whatever. They will minimize the violence towards fire. How to do that? They will not do anything after sunset. Eating, drinking, reading, writing, jo karna hai, sunset ke pehle karo. So you don't cause more carbon footprint. So in the innovative design of thought, they equated carbon footprint with karmic footprint. If you keep your carbon footprint low, your karma footprint will also be low, which will help you towards your spiritual liberation, that is moksha, that indirectly as a byproduct is helping you keeping your carbon footprint low. Carbon footprint equals karma footprint or karmic footprint. Karmic footprint equals carbon footprint. So this is how Jains came up with this taxonomy of beings based on senses: 1 sense, 2 sense, 3 sense, 4 and 5. 5 sense beings, they're all equal. So definitely don't cause violence to 5 sense beings. But even 1 sense beings, even plants as Jains are consuming, they will avoid eating potatoes or eggplants or onions or garlics. Why would they avoid that? Because of the microbes, and because you're killing the entire root of a plant. As you pull off the plant, you do more violence to the entire plant. So take only the minimal. Take only those fruit that have naturally fallen off of a plant. So these are all the unique Jain ideas that probably influenced pan-Indian society, and the shift happened from animal sacrifices to more vegetarian sacrifices. And eventually India remains the only country where almost 40% of people are at least partially vegetarians. All right, next please. Okay, so this is what I was showing you in a different graphics here. So beings and mundane beings, liberated beings, mobile beings, immobile beings, and immobile beings, there are 1 sense beings: earth, water, fire, air, and plants. Only India, most likely only India has came up with these ideas there, where soul or Brahman or consciousness is imagined even in earth, water, fire, and air. See, these are all the living beings. Yeah, next please. Okay, so other way to look at Jainism is from these 3 A words. A, ahimsa, we talked about non-violence. Aparigraha, non-accumulation. Minimize your accumulation, right? If our accumulation is minimal, obviously our carbon footprint is minimal, our karmic footprint is also minimal. Again, those two are connected. Then anekantvad. Anekantvad is intellectual non-violence. So this earth is not just for human beings. This earth is for animals first, because they came most likely before human beings came. So I've spent almost 3 decades in the US. So in the US, on national highways, there are signs that pedestrians are not allowed. Indian highways, the signs are, this is elephant corridor. Do not honk elephants. If you go from Haridwar to Rishikesh, you will see those signs. ये हाथियों की जगह है. हाथियों आप horn में नहीं बजा सकते. So this is the difference to civilizations look at flora and fauna. This highway, national highway is for not just for elephant. Delhi is for monkeys and dogs, right? Every city we have to stop our car and whatever we're doing, let the animals pass, right? We have no privilege. So that is how non-Western civilizations such as India have looked at wider society, wider animal planet. Next, please. Going fast. All right. These are the Tirthankaras, the role models of Jainism, in which Mahavir name you might have heard. Mahavir was contemporary of the Buddha. Mahavir said 24th Tirthankar. Mahavir said, as he's passing away, as he's almost about to die on the Diwali day, he passed away on Diwali night. He sends his chosen disciple to stop cattle slaughter. Somewhere, some cattle is being slaughtered. He says, go and stop that. So animal jeev daya, animal well-being is utmost in his mind, even as he's passing away. Then he says, trees are inherently valuable. He says, vegetation has life, just as humans. More than 2 millennia ago, our people have imagined and probably proven that plants have life. Then 22nd Tirthankar also similarly, he stops animal slaughter. 23rd Tirthankar responds to burning of snake. Even a snake being burnt changes their entire life. Then other texts we say, in Jain texts, they say other souls render service to one another. Behavior of the bees. How do bees live in this world? Bees collect only minimal nectar from each flower without damaging the flower itself. So human beings should live like bees. Take only what is absolutely minimal that is needed without causing any damage to the environment. Then forests are like saints. Trees should be planted for positive karma. Again, karmic footprint, carbon footprint are equal. Next. Jain householders, over millennia, you will see Jain householders not in charcoal trading or timber trading, animals in carts, or alcohol trading, slaves trading, weapons trading, poison trading. You will find them doing mostly trading, banking, commercial activities, government jobs, manufacturing, publishing, media. Tangibly violent professions they avoided. Jains avoided the violent professions, so-called violent professions, and relatively less violent professions or careers Jains always preferred. If that's the householders. Next, please. Then Jain ideas can be compared with modern scientific ideas also. So Brian Swim says that material objects gives us consumerism. Consumerism gives us depression. Who says Brian Swim in 21st century? Our people, all Hindu, Buddhist, Jains have been saying these ideas for over 2 millennia, that do not be obsessed with latest phone or latest fashion trend or whatever. That's the same idea. Then he says earth is alive and responds to our presence. Our people imagine Bhudevi in Rigveda, Atharvaveda, and earth as living being in Jainism. We said these things much earlier. Universal celebration of origin. He says that because Big Bang created the entire universe, so entire universe is one family, says Brian Swim. And our people, again, Jain, Hindu, Buddhists, have been saying similar things for millennia. Thomas Berry and David Abram also are environmental philosophers. They say world is a communion of objects, subjects, not a collection of objects. Even a chair has its own agency. Even a tree has its own agency. Do not treat the tree as an object. So that again matches with Jain, Hindu, Buddhist perspective, that view of soul in all beings, view of Brahman in all beings, view of Buddha nature in all beings. Same thing. Diversity of local forms, says David Abram, and that matches with Jain insistence of changing lifestyle. Mahavir for changing the minds. Trees are inherently valuable for beauty and strength compared with Western philosophy. Next, please. Gandhi can be seen as a role model that embodied many of these ideas. He was inspired by a Jain guru called Srimad Rajchandra. When Gandhi was in South Africa, he was approached by different religious leaders such as Christians and Muslims, and who challenged his faith of Hinduism or whatever faith that he was having. So he started writing letters in Gujarati language to a guru called Srimad Rajchandra. For 6 years, they continued their correspondence, and Srimad Rajchandra influenced Gandhi so much that his entire life became dependent on these principles such as truth, satya, ahimsa, aparigraha, brahmacharya, purusharth, and upvas, which are the hallmarks of most of the monks in Jainism and even Hinduism also and Buddhism also. Gandhi's life can be seen as an ecological treatise, a living ecosystem, where his meal consisted of nuts and fruits, his daily ablutions and bodily practices, yoga and meditation that he did, periodic observance of silence, maun vrats, practice of maun, morning walks, cultivation of small with the big. If you have seen the film Gandhi, the Hollywood film, 1982 film, have you seen Hollywood film Gandhi? In which he takes care of a goat first while a national meeting is going on. For him, a goat is as important as India's freedom and national political struggle. Abhorrence of waste. Gandhi's son loses a small piece of pencil. And Gandhi loses his entire sleep for the entire night. कि मैंने कहाँ गलती की अपने parenting में कि मेरे बेटे को उस छोटी पेंसिल की वैल्यू नहीं पता. Waste नहीं करना. Abhorrence of waste for waste. So today, moralists, non-violent activists, feminists, journalists, social reformers, trade union leaders, peasants, prohibitionists, nature lovers, renouncers, environmentalists, all take inspiration from Gandhi's life. We know the Chipko movement. How many of you have heard of Chipko movement, students? Chipko movement के जो founders थे, one of the founders, Sundarlal Bhogran and Chandri Prasad Bhatt, were inspired by Gandhi. Gandhi was inspired by Srimad Rajchandra. Srimad Rajchandra was inspired by Mahavir. So you see this tradition of non-violence coming from Mahavir to Mahatma to Martin Luther King in America, Nelson Mandela in South Africa, Sundarlal Bhogran in India, Medha Patkar in India. So this tradition of respect for nature. Next, please. More examples of environmental protection in Indian history. Ashoka's edicts. Have you been to Ashoka Pillar in Delhi? Not too far from here. Then Ashoka edict, one is in Gujarat, one is in Odisha. Right? You have been exploring India, I've heard from your professors, and you need to go to Odisha now and Gujarat also. Ashoka's grandfather and grandson both adopt Jainism as in their life. Then Gujar King Siddharaj and his successor Kumarpal also adopted Jainism. Muhammad Tughlaq, Akbar and Jahangir also were influenced by Jain monks very partially, in a very small way, but they welcomed Jain monks in their darbar and they announced prohibition for hunting and prohibition for meat eating. Even some scenes are shown in the film Jodha Akbar also. Next, please. Jains today are not so ideal. They are indulging in some pollution and so on. But to balance the picture, wait. There is a bird hospital in Chandni Chowk. Have you been to Chandni Chowk? जब आप शीशगंज गुरुद्वारा जाते हैं वहां से उसके पहले एक लाल मंदिर दिखता है. उस मंदिर के जस्ट लेफ्ट में एक पक्षी चिकित्सालय that is funded by Jains and Hindus. So that tradition of Jeev there continues even in Delhi. Next, and then cattle sanctuaries, Goshalas and Pinjar poles, thousands and thousands of cattle sanctuaries across India. Only in India you see this. Old cattle or diseased cattle, जो बीमार हो गई गाय, सबको वहां पे आप लाके भर्ती कर सकते हो, उनकी देखभाल की जाएगी. पैसा आ रहा है हिंदुओं और जैनों से. Jains and Hindus have been at the forefront of saving even sick cattle. Next, please. Because of Jeev there. Then Jain temples in the US going green and adopting solar panels and so on. Even in India, some Jain temples are doing the similar thing. Next, please. That's the same thing. Yeah, that's what I was telling you. Yeah, next, please. Okay. Yeah, then Goa's largest wildlife sanctuary national park is named after Mahavir. Pinjar poles and beef ban. They've been trying in different times, different places. Yes, next, please. Okay, okay, yes. All right, that was quick summary of Jainism. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jain. It was very enlightening. I noted some very relevant points. Eye opener. And in your case also, I reserve this question answers later on. And therefore, now I request Professor Suparna Divakar. You have talk.
So good afternoon and namaste to everyone and pranam to all the panelists. Ganti Murthy ji, I am missing you over here. So the stalwarts have already given you a broad framework. So I thought I would focus on what does it mean? You know, we have these ancient traditions, we have a certain philosophy, and how can this philosophy inform the way we think about the future, right? So I will not go too much into, the kind of philosophical foundations that have already been spoken about. I am not at all qualified to do that. But I want to pose a question to you, right? That given all this and given where we are, one question is, we all talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. Everyone knows about it. It's all over the newspapers. Is sustainability enough? That's one question. And in my view, what we face today is really a design problem. So if we are to think about one, sustainability and what does it mean? Sustainability has basically been defined by the Brundtland Commission that we do not consume so much that we take away the ability of the future to live a life maybe better than what we live, right? So one of the things is, Gantimurthy ji showed us the planetary boundaries picture. So out of the 9 planetary boundaries, we have already crossed 6. So sustainability has become a redundant word at the moment. What we really need is restoration and regeneration. And that leads me to the question of what does it mean from the way we design our lives, the products we use, the processes that we design. What does it mean for the way we live? So there is a philosophy, very rich, unique philosophy. We have a current situation where sustainability is not enough. And we've got this design issue, right? So in this context, what is it that we can learn from the traditions and practice that we've had in ancient India that can inform life now, which is the topic of our seminar today? So I just wanted to show you a small, normally we hear about the 3 Rs, right? That you reduce, you recycle, and so on. I want to show you 7 Rs. And at the center of it is all the things that we've been talking about so far, right? Which is be mindful of your consumption, your relationship with things, right? That is what we just heard, and our own relationship with Mother Earth. That's at the center, which we have spoken so much about so far. Now let's go around the other REs, right? So we've heard about reducing. So you basically reduce consumption, you walk out of the room, please switch off all the lights, switch off the fans, blah, blah, blah. Then we are talking about reusing, which is recycling in some ways. Third, repairing, which has become unfashionable now. You don't repair anything. You have an iPhone, which is creating a problem. There's no one who can repair it. You throw it and get the next iPhone, because that keeps the economy running, right? Very important. In fact, you design it in a way, design your products in a way that they become useless after a defined point of time, right? So again, we come back to a design question, right? We have talked about community. Sense of community is a very important value that we've had in India, which continues slowly dying out, but is there. How do we learn to share? And this sharing, everybody doesn't require, what shall we say? There are so many things that we can easily share, which are not required by every individual person to own, right? For example, there are many households who have cycles who will go and buy their own cycle pump. Not required, right? It's quite possible to share it with your neighbor. What are other things that we can share? Which means what? Again, you're reducing your consumption, but it also has an implication on the design of the way our economy functions. Everything boils down to that, no? Then recovering. Now, why is recovering materials going to be critical? We are running out of some of the most important minerals that are required for our lives to continue the way it is right now. All of us have laptops, right? All of us have phones. These are all dependent on minerals that we are running really very fast, we are running out of them. Which means again, what? Design. Again, it means design. If you're running out of materials, there's a shortage of materials, what are you going to do? You have to either think about how you're going to recover the materials, which means the way you're designing the product in the first place has to be such that materials can be recovered, right? So what does this mean for the way that we are going to be living our lives in the coming decades and years, you all basically, right? And recycling, we all know about. So there is sustainability and there is regeneration. So I want to just propose a few principles that we might want to think about emerging from the ideas that we have heard so far. So first of all, I think just anchoring ourselves in the idea that we are part of a web of life. We are in a web of life which is completely interdependent, interconnected. We are in a system. And it's a living system which is extremely complex. And many times we do not realize the very complex pathways of relationships that exist in this web of life. We begin to realize it when things start disappearing, right? So there is a story of, I don't know, have you all heard of Johan Rockström? He is a scientist who is working in the Stockholm Resilience Center, and he tells a story about how people are going from UK to the Netherlands to guess what? Steal bees. Steal bees. Because without bees in the UK, they're finding it difficult to produce anything. Crops require, agriculture requires bees. Until they disappeared, they were killed systematically, right? Because we put poison into everything. And it's only when they disappeared, they realized the value of one tiny thing called a bee. So there are many things we do not know, right? And in this complexity. So one of the, I feel, key principles we need to think about, which emerges from our ancient ecological consciousness, is this principle, basic principle of being completely aware of this web of life. Be aware of it. Even if you do not have the knowledge about the exact pathways of those relationships, it's fine. At least acknowledge that you are a small part of that web. Second, how do you locate yourself in place and relationships with people? So you are locating yourself in place, in relationship with place and with people. Only then will you be able to build on knowledge that has emerged for you from the ancestral understandings and knowledge to be able to apply for the current. Because a solution that is applicable in a place, right, which is the swabhava of that place, is not applicable in another place because it has its own character. So can we locate ourselves in relationship to place and relationship to people? These two become very important. And when I'm saying place, I'm not going back to an anthropocentric thought, right? Because I'm mentioning people, but I'm saying people from the point of view of knowledge that has been gathered over time. And I'm saying place, I'm talking about everything in place, sentient and insentient, right? Third, the rate at which we use our resources has to be less than the rate at which it can regenerate. So you will see there are many fishing communities which ban fishing during spawning season. Fish cannot be eaten. It is banned, right? In certain seasons of the year when fish are spawning. It protects the cycle of regeneration. So this is again a design principle. It's a practice that has been designed for sustainability, but from a regenerative lens, right? So that's one more principle I feel we should be able to learn from the past. The idea of time, right? Today, our design does not take into account a very important variable called time. Because we are so fixated on the 3-month quarterly result, we are fixated on who's making profits in the short term. Everything is about 3 months and 1 year, right? But the effects of what we do last for several generations. So what might look like a solution today can become the problem of tomorrow. And so one of the design principles we should think about, which has been thought about by our ancestors, which is part of the knowledge of India, is to think about intergenerational, right? And in some places, 7 generations. What effect is my action going to have on the 7th generation from now? Right? So that is the ecological consciousness. Can we think about my action today, my design today, the product I'm using today, what effect is it going to? It's a choice we are making, right? You go to a supermarket and there are 100 things, different varieties of, clothes, which maybe cost 300 rupees, right? And we end up buying it because it's cheaper. But if you start thinking about where it came from, right, and the carbon footprint that's not got added, the amount of water that got wasted in the process of that production, the 300 rupees is not an indication of the actual cost of producing that particular garment, right? So be careful about the choices we make. I think that one very, very important idea, or let's say cultural practice, is that of community. And because of the sense of community, we have sustained our civilization till now. And any sustainability practice, or I should say restoration and regenerative practice, which you'll hear more about now, is going to require a sense of community. And we are very fast losing that to individualism, right? So I just want to leave you with one story and one question. This story I heard from a colleague of mine, Mr. Venkatesh Murthy, who is the head of Youth for Seva. He told me about how he took a group of students to Uttarakhand. And they were basically MBA students. And they were asked to do a study of some farms there to see what is it that can be done to improve the incomes of these farmers, right? So most farmers are marginal farmers. They have maybe 2-3 acres. They are growing 2-3 crops a year because Uttarakhand has water, and then there's terrace farming. Their practices are amazing, all the things that Ganti Murthy ji was just talking about. So these MBA students, they stayed there and they did all their, cost benefit analysis, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of it, they gathered all the farmers and said, you know what, we want to share with you the results of our study. And the farmers are very curious. Okay, please tell us, you've spent so much time with us, what happened? So these guys are telling them big PPT, graphs, blah, blah. And then they're saying, you know what? You're losing 25% of all your crops to monkeys and rats. Monkeys and rats, right? And so what you need to do is to invest on infrastructure that will help you to get rid of these monkeys and get rid of the rats. So the villagers were, sort of listening, how the villagers are. Yes, they're quite stupid, aren't they? So they sat there and, they listened. And after a bit, they said, you know what? It's okay if you're losing 25%. The monkeys and the rats have as much right to this land as we have. They have as much right to what Mother Nature has given us as we have. And so it doesn't matter if we're losing 25%. It's fine. And the question I want to leave you with this, SDGs have the 17 SDGs, yeah? The 8th one is on economic growth. To be able to meet the other 16, we have to think about this SDG 8. Now, the question I want to leave you with is, given this ecological consciousness that we have had so far, and we want to continue because that's what the world needs, how will we recast SDG number 8? I want you to just think about it. Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Suparna ji. Grateful for such a wonderful speech. और अब मैं बड़ा हर्षित होकर हरसाना जी से रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि आगे के दूसरे बोले.
थैंक यू वेरी मच सर. थैंक यू. मैं इससे पहले जितने भी वक्ताओं ने यहाँ पे अपना जो संबोधन किया है, और मैं धन्यवाद करता हूँ सबसे पहले हरितक्रम का, शहीद भगत सिंह कॉलेज का, बाकी सभी लोगों का जिन्होंने कि मुझे इस लायक समझा और यहाँ पे मुझे बोलने का अपॉर्चुनिटी दी. तो बेसिकली मैं सोच रहा था कि मेरे को बोलना है तो मैं क्या बोलूं, और ये टॉपिक देखते देखते मेरे को ध्यान आया कि इकोलॉजिकल कॉन्शियसनेस इन एंसाइंट इंडिया, लाइफ देन एंड नाउ, और वो दिल्ली में है. तो दिल्ली की अपने आप में एक बड़ी अच्छी हिस्ट्री है कि दिल्ली जब शुरुआत हुई थी इंद्रप्रस्थ में, तो खांडव को पूरा जो तहस नहस करके दिल्ली बनाया गया, और फिर इंद्रप्रस्थ जो है वो बाद में दिल्ली बन गया, दिल्ली नई दिल्ली बना, नई दिल्ली कैपिटल दिल्ली बना, और नेशनल कैपिटल बना, और नेशनल कैपिटल जो है फिर एक्सटेंड होते होते नेशनल कैपिटल रीजनल बना. और ये नेशनल कैपिटल रीजनल जो है अपने आप में एक हजारों साल के इतिहास में बहुत सारी जो ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिसेस, जो इकोलॉजिकल जो ट्रेडिशनल जो हमारा सिस्टम था उसको खाया जा रहा है. तो उसी में से एक छोटी सी एरिया, एक स्ट्रेच के बारे में हम थोड़ा सा बात करना चाहेंगे. तो बेसिकली दिल्ली और दिल्ली के साथ में जुड़ा हुआ फरीदाबाद और गुड़गांव, जब हम नेशनल कैपिटल रीजन की बात करते हैं तो इन तीन शहरों का बड़े सबसे पहले हमारे सामने नाम आता है. इसके बीच में एक स्ट्रेच है जो तकरीबन 250 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर का स्ट्रेच है. सर पिछले वाले में रखा अभी. सो ये जो हरियाणा इसमें दिल्ली की बाउंड्री शेयर करता है. इसमें अगर आप उस वाले जो मैप को देखोगे तो जो ब्लू कलर है ऊपर की तरफ, वो असोला वाइल्ड लाइफ सेंचुरी है. थोड़ा सा स्टॉप जो दिल्ली से बच गया तो उन्होंने प्रोटेक्ट करके अपनी जो जिम्मेदारी से पल्ला झाड़ लिया. हरियाणा वाले भी लड़ रहे हैं कि हमें तो और चाहिए भाई, बहुत अभी टूटी नहीं पड़ी है. तो इसमें जो आपको ग्रीन वाला जो पोर्शन दिख रहा है, ये मांगर बनी करके एक सेक्रेड ग्रोव है. सेक्रेड ग्रोव इन द सेंस कि जो यहाँ पे पास्टर कम्युनिटी है जिन्होंने हजारों साल से इस एरिया को प्रोटेक्ट किया हुआ है. और अगर आप इस एरिया पे ध्यान से देखोगे तो इस एरिया की जो मेन लाइफ लाइन कही जाने वाली सबसे ऊपर जो है सूरज कुंड लेक है, ब्राउन कलर वाले पोर्शन में. फिर वहाँ पे एक पीकॉक लेक है, फिर भड़कल लेक है, भौज लेक है, और लास्ट में दमदमा लेक है। लाइफ लाइन कही जा सकते हैं इस एनसीआर एरिया की, ये रिचार्ज जोन थे, लेकिन आहिस्ता आहिस्ता इनमें से सारी तकरीबन खत्म हो चुकी है। अभी दमदमा जो है वो अंतिम सांस ले रहा है। सर नेक्स्ट करना। सो बेसिकली फरीदाबाद में हिस्टोरिकली जो हिल था ये विलेज वाइज जो डिवाइड था, अगर आप इसमें देखो ना तो बाउंड्री जो थी वो डिसाइड होती थी वाटर साइड के बेस पे। जिस वाटर साइड का जितना पानी जिस गांव की तरफ आता था, हिल का उतना पोर्शन उस गांव का था। और मांगल जो है वो बिल्कुल इसमें सेंट्रल विलेज है। तो सेंट्रल विलेज होने की वजह से जो फरीदाबाद से कनेक्ट अरावली जिसमें कोई रेंज का तक का जो एरिया है उसको मांगर हिल का नाम से भी जाना जाता है। असोला के बाद में जो सेकंड नाम आता है वो मांगर का आता है, ऊपर की तरफ सूरजकुंड का आता है। सर नेक्स्ट। सो फॉरेस्ट टाइप की अगर हम बात करें तो यहाँ पे ग्रुप 5 है ड्राई डेसिडुअस फॉरेस्ट, जिसमें कि लीफ साइड हो जाता है आफ्टर मानसून। और ट्रॉपिकल थॉर्न फॉरेस्ट है जो कि ड्रेजिंग से बचने के लिए काटे उगाते हैं। सर नेक्स्ट करना। आ, और इस तरह का जो क्लाइमैक्स है जनरली हमें फॉरेस्ट का दिखता है। दिल्ली के बिल्कुल बगल में ही मैं ये लैंडस्केप की बात कर रहा हूँ। सर नेक्स्ट करना। यहाँ का जो स्पेशलिस्ट है वो एनोगाइसिस पेंडुला है, जो कि रॉकी स्लोपी एरियाज का स्पेशलिस्ट माना जाता है। और जनरली इसकी स्पेशलिटी है कि ये बहुत ही डिफिकल्ट जो इन्वायरमेंट है उसमें सरवाइव करता है। और यहाँ के जितना भी हमारी बायोडाइवर्सिटी है, क्योंकि यहाँ पे एक पर्टिकुलर सीजन में ही मानसून में ही ग्राउंड कवर होता है, तो ग्रास खत्म हो जाता है मानसून के बाद में। तो बहुत सारा जो इंडियन स्पीसीज है उसकी डिपेंडेंसी इसी के ऊपर होती है। सर नेक्स्ट करना। और इस ये जो है ये मांगर बनी करके सेक्रेड ग्रोव है, करीब करीब 700 एकड़ का एरिया है, जिसको कि हमारी पिछली 5-7 जनरेशन ने प्रोटेक्ट करके रखा हुआ है। 99% यहाँ पे एनोगाइसिस पेंडुला, इसके अलावा यहाँ पे बॉसिवेलिया सराटा, डाउस्पायरस कॉर्डिपोलिया, होलोटेलिया इंटेग्रिफोलिया जैसी जो नेटिव बिल्कुल नेचुरल स्पीसीज है 99% प्रोटेक्ट है। यहाँ की स्टोरी है कि जब ये हमारा गाँव यहाँ पे बसा था, ये गुजरों का गाँव है, चरवाए हैं। और यहाँ पे किसी बाबा ने तपस्या की थी, और तपस्या करते करते जो यहाँ पे जो लास्ट में मॉन्यूमेंट दिख रहा है उसके अंदर एक केव नेचुरल, बाद में इन्होंने मॉडिफाइड करके मंदिर बना दिया। उसके अंदर वो गए, अंदर ध्यान हो गए, और जो पीछे उनको फॉलो करते हुए लोग गए कि यहाँ पे कोई बाबा जी घुसा है, तो उनको वहां पर कपड़े मिले। कपड़े को लोकल भाषा में गुदड़े कहते हैं, तो हम उनको सिर्फ गुदड़े बाबा के नाम से भी जानते हैं। यहाँ पर स्टोरी है कि अगर कोई भी बंदा इसमें अपने पर्सनल यूज के लिए एक दातुन एक पत्ती तक को भी नुकसान पहुंचाता है तो गुदड़िया बाबा का श्राप उसको भुगतना पड़ता है। और ऐसी कई सारी बहुत सारी स्टोरीज हमारी समाज सोसाइटी में मानी जाती है कि जब कभी भी बहुत सारे किसी आदमी ने इसको भूलपूर्वक जो नुकसान पहुंचाने की कोशिश की। फॉर एग्जांपल एक स्टोरी है कि रैबारी एक कम्युनिटी होती है जो ऊंट पालते हैं, उन्होंने यहाँ पे आकर के अपने ऊंट छोड़ दिए। तो बाबा प्रकट हुए, उन्होंने उनको बोला कि भाई मेरे जो है बालों को खींचने हैं, तो अपने ऊंट बाहर कर ले। तो उसने कहा तेरे जैसे मुर्दा कितने घूमे हैं, चल निकल यहाँ से। तो बाबा गायब हुए, सारे जो है मरने शुरू हो गए। तो उसने पूछा कि भाई ऐसे ऐसे मेरे साथ हुआ है। गांव के किसी ने बताया कि भाई जाके बाबा से क्षमा मांग, तूने तो गड़बड़ कर दिया। तो वो धोने पे गए तो जो ऊँट के जो मतलब बेहोश हो गए थे या मर गए थे वो फिर से खड़े हो गए। पर आवाज आई कि आज के बाद जो है तेरे जो है ऊँट मेरी एरिया में नहीं घुसने चाहिए। तो ये कहावत है कि जो व्यापारी राजस्थान से आते हैं वो कभी भी मंदिरबनी के एरिया के अंदर एंट्री भी नहीं करते हैं। ऐसी बहुत सारी स्टोरीज हैं जो इस जंगल को प्रोटेक्ट करती हैं। तो आगे लेना। हिस्टोरिकली ये एरिया जो कॉमन लैंड था, सामला का एरिया था। 1961 से पहले जो है, तो 1938 का जो विलेज सेटलमेंट एक्ट था उस में जो था खासकर ब्रिटिशर्स ने दो तरह के रूल्स यहाँ पे लागू किए थे। एक एरिया वो था जिनसे कि वो रेवेन्यू जनरेट करते थे, दूसरे एरिया जो थे कॉमन पर्पज में थे, उनको उन्होंने कॉमन पर्पज में रिजर्व रखा हुआ था। तो ये एरिया और रिकॉर्ड में ही गैर मुमकिन पहाड़ था। 1961 में पंजाब विलेज कॉमन लैंड एक्ट आया, और पंजाब विलेज कॉमन लैंड एक्ट में प्रोविजन था कि अगर 1938 के सेटलमेंट में कॉमन लैंड पे एग्रीकल्चर एग्जिस्ट होता है तो जो एग्रीकल्चर जो फार्मर है वो ऑनरशिप के लिए क्लेम कर सकता है। बेस्ड ऑन दिस एक्ट का मिसयूज करके बहुत सारे फॉल्स क्लेम जो है कोर्ट में पेश हुए, और दूसरी तरफ पंचायतों ने जानबूझ करके केस नहीं लड़े, तो हिल का बहुत सारा एरिया जो है अभी मिसयूज करके लॉ का जो है प्राइवेट हो चुका है। नेक्स्ट लेना सर। सो हिस्टोरिकली ज्यादातर जो है लोग कॉमन यूज में करते थे, और यहाँ पे जो है चरवाही के काम में ये जंगल आता था। नेक्स्ट करना। और फूड फाउडर वगैरह जो भी लोकल कम्युनिटी थी उसकी डिपेंडेंसी, पूरी जो कम्युनिटी थी चाहे वो किसी भी कास्ट से बिलोंग करता है, सब कॉमन इस जंगल को यूज करते आए थे। सर नेक्स्ट लेना। और मांगरबनी की जो प्रैक्टिस है, मैंने अभी थोड़ी देर पहले बता ही दिया था कि ये जो है ये यहाँ पे इस तरह की जो चीजें हैं वो भी एक कॉमन पर्पज में, और ये हर गांव में इस तरह की प्रैक्टिस है। मांगरबनी क्योंकि अभी यूज में है तो अभी भी एग्जाम्पल की तरह दी जाती है, पर ये हर गांव में था। बरकल में परचून मंदिर था, आगे जाकर के मोहताबाद में झूमना मंदिर था, कोट में था। ये हर गांव में इस तरह की जो स्टोरी आपको मिलेंगी जो किसी न किसी तरह से जंगल से लिंक थी, और वो जंगल को प्रिजर्व किया करती थी। नेक्स्ट है ना सर। 1961 में हिल का प्राइवेटाइजेशन किया, फिर कंसोलिडेशन करके हिल को जो है यहाँ पे मैं मिस यूज शब्द का इस्तेमाल इसलिए कर रहा हूँ कि एक्ट जो है वो दो उस पर बेस्ड था। एक था कि अगर एग्रीकल्चर एग्जिस्ट करता है तो ऑनरशिप के लिए क्लेम किया जा सकता है। ये जमीन आज भी रिकॉर्ड में गैर मुमकिन पहाड़ यानी नॉन कल्टिवेबल लैंड है। सेकंड जो है जो लैंड कंसोलिडेशन एक्ट था उसमें प्रोविजन ये था कि लैंड कंसोलिडेशन जो है एग्रीकल्चर को फैसिलिटेट करने के लिए किया जा सकता है, लेकिन जब जमीन ही नॉन एग्रीकल्चर है तो फिर उसका कंसोलिडेशन कैसे कर दिया गया। नेक्स्ट करना सर। तो इसको उसका बेस बना करके बड़ी बड़ी काफी सारी कंपनियों ने यहाँ पर अपने लैंड बैंक बना लिए। जैसे ये वाला जो एरिया है जो रेड वाला उधर दिख रहा है वो एक M3 करके बड़ी रियल एस्टेट कंपनी है। इधर जो है ये रामदेव की बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां है। तो इस तरह के जो काफी खेल यहाँ पे स्कैम जो है वो शुरू हुआ। नेक्स्ट करना सर। और माइनिंग माइनिंग इज वेरी बहुत बड़ा थ्रेट था हिल के बहुत एरिया को। तो पहले जो है काफी डीप तरीके से तोड़ा गया, और अभी भी जो है मतलब अभी क्योंकि रियल एस्टेट भी एक तरीके से माइनिंग में ही कन्वर्ट हो गया। अब ये है कि लैंड यूज चेंज लिया जाता है किसी प्रोजेक्ट के लिए, बेसमेंट के नाम पे सड़क के नाम पे माइनिंग ही की जा रही है उस प्रोजेक्ट के लिए। नेक्स्ट करना। तो पुरानी जो माइनिंग थी माइनिंग क्वारी इतनी डीप हुई कि ग्राउंड वाटर एक्सपोज हो गया, और इस तरह से जो है जो हमारी जो नेचुरल लेक्स है जिनकी मैं बात कर रहा था वो सारी अभी खत्म हो गई है। उसकी जगह पे जो ग्राउंड वाटर एक्सपोज होकर के कुछ नई लेक्स जो है पेरेनियल यहाँ पे बनी, जिनको आज की डेट में हम नई नई लेक जैसे कहीं भारद्वाज लेक, सैली लेक, निहारिका लेक, ये नई नई लेक जो है ये हमें अभी ह्यूमन मेड लेक्स है। नेक्स्ट करना। लैंड यूज चेंज जो है बड़ा, और इसमें दो तरह के खेल हैं। एक जो बड़े जो सार्क है वो बड़ा लैंड बैंक करके और उसके थ्रू जो है वो यूज कर रहे हैं, पुश कर रहे हैं पॉलिसी लॉज को चेंज करने का। दूसरा गेम होता है जो छोटे खिलाड़ी हैं वो क्या करते हैं, वो पहले पेड़ काटते हैं, जंगल को साफ करते हैं। नेक्स्ट करना जी। बाउंड्री डालते हैं, फिर ऐसे इलीगल स्ट्रक्चर बना लेते हैं, और फिर बेस्ड ऑन कि अगर उनको मिलेगा तो हमारा भी हो जाएगा, वो खेलते रहते हैं। चलो जी। इसके अलावा जो गार्बेज है शहरों का जो डंप है, अब कहीं भी जगह नहीं है तो क्या मॉडर्नाइजेशन की कीमत तो नेचर को चुकानी पड़ती है। नेक्स्ट। तो इसका जो रिजल्ट आ रहा है कि यहाँ की वाइल्ड लाइफ जो बेचारी लाचार होकर के, क्योंकि जंगल जो है वो ब्लॉक्स में बट गए हैं, डिवाइड हो चुके हैं, तो मजबूरन उनको रोड पे आना पड़ रहा है। या आबादी वाले एरियाज में आना पड़ रहा है, दिल्ली में आना पड़ रहा है, तो ये शोर मच रहा है कि भाई यहाँ पे आ गया, रासायनिक फार्म पे आ गया, वहां पे आ गया। चलिए सर नेक्स्ट। और बहुत सारे जो है वो हादसे में जान भी जा रही है, मर भी रहे हो। नेक्स्ट करना सर। सो अगर हम यहाँ की थोड़ा सा मैं फिर से हिस्ट्री में जा रहा हूँ कि 2003 में यहाँ पे माइनिंग सुप्रीम कोर्ट इंटरवेंशन से बंद हुई थी। तो ऊपर की तरफ अगर आप देखो तो हिल का जो एरिया है वो और ये 2022 में तो इतना जो अंतर है यहाँ पे अभी आया है। यहाँ पे जो प्रोटेक्शन पिछले 10-11 साल से हुआ है उसकी वजह से फॉरेस्ट कवर दोबारा से रिकवर हो गया। मोस्टली अगर नीचे वाली स्लाइड में क्योंकि डार्केस्ट जो कलर है उसको देखोगे तो ये सारा एलिगेंसिस पेंडुलम ने अपने आप को दोबारा से ओवरलैप किया है, और इन्वेजिव स्पीसीज के साथ एक कंपटीशन चल रहा है। और बेसिकली इसकी वजह से यहाँ पे वाइल्ड लाइफ भी काफी बढ़ी है। सर आगे लेना। सो बेसिकली जैसे अभी इस वाली फोटो में अगर आप देखो तो यहाँ पे पहले जो ग्रीन वाले जो लीव्स है लाइट कीकर आया, और इसके साथ साथ जो लाइट वाले जो आपको दिखेगा ये सारा एनोगाइसिस है, जो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता एरिया को जो है रिकवर कर रहा है। सर नेक्स्ट करना। सो बेसिकली हमें यहाँ पे पुरानी जो हिस्ट्री थी माइनिंग के बाद के दौर में यहाँ से वाइल्ड लाइफ वगैरह सारा खत्म हो गया था, पर लकीली जो कंजर्वेशन था उसके एफर्ट के थ्रू 2013 में हमें हमारा दोबारा से हमारा लेपर्ड ये मिला, मतलब हमारा इसलिए कह रहा हूँ कि ये मांगरबनी में मिला था। तो बेसिकली नेक्स्ट चलना सर। और यहाँ पे जो अभी यहाँ का बर्ड काउंट जो है वो 245 स्पीसीज ईयरली है, जिसमें कई सारी जो है खासकर रेड हेडेड वल्चर और इजिप्शियन वल्चर जैसी स्पीसीज जो है काफी रेयर है। प्लस इंडियन पिट्टा जो ये गेस्ट है जो बहुत सारे बर्डर्स और नेचर लवर्स को हर साल जो है अपनी तरफ मांगर की तरफ अट्रैक्ट करता है। नेक्स्ट है सर। इसके अलावा यहाँ पे 2021 में मतलब ऐसे यहाँ पे ढूंढते ढूंढते एक आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट जो है वो मिल गई। तो नेक्स्ट करें सर। इसमें जो रॉक आर्ट थी यहाँ पे, जो कि मतलब आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट क्लेम कर रहे हैं कि 25,000 से 1 लाख साल तक पुरानी हो सकती है। और इसमें जो हमें फिर ये जो स्टार्टिंग स्टेज था 2021 से जो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन और जो आर्कियोलॉजिकल साइट्स को ढूंढने का जो प्रोसेस चला, वो चलते चलते अभी यहाँ पे हमारे पास 250 के करीब जो मंगल से के एरिया में है, करीब करीब 250 के करीब नॉन साइट्स हमारे पास है। लेकिन प्रॉब्लम ये थी कि 2021 में जैसे ही हाईलाइट हुआ तो प्रपोजल बना दिया काफी बड़ा सा कि भाई इसको जो है प्रिजर्व करना है। सर नेक्स्ट लेना, लेकिन हुआ कुछ खास नहीं। इन्होंने जो है वो बाकी जो है चीजों की तरफ उसको भी लटका दिया। फाइनली पिछले साल जो है सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने एक बार फिर से शो मोटो नोटिस लिया और इनसे पूछा कि भाई इसके आप, इन्होंने माइनिंग का प्रपोजल डाला था और ये माइनिंग खोलना चाहते थे, तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने पूछा माइनिंग तो आप खोलना चाहते हो, जो आर्कियोलॉजिकल फाइंडिंग्स हुई है उनका क्या किया है। तो आर्कियोलॉजिकल फाइंडिंग पे इन्होंने फिर से एक सर्वे रिपोर्ट की, उसके बारे में हम थोड़ा आगे बात करेंगे। सर आगे लेना। तो बेसिकली ये वाले जो ब्लॉक्स है जो इसमें दिख रहा है, ये इन्होंने 600 हेक्टेयर जो है माइनिंग प्रपोज कर दी कि ये एरिया हमें दोबारा से माइनिंग के लिए दिया जाए। तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट के इंटरवेंशन की वजह से आर्कियोलॉजी डिपार्टमेंट ने यहाँ पे सर्वे किया एज ए पार्ट ऑफ सर्वे ऑफ इंडिया जो है। हमने मतलब मैं इनके साथ था उस टाइम पे, तो हमने जो जिन एरियाज को सर्च किया, तो जो रेड वाले जो मार्क है ये आपको दिख रहे हैं, ये पुरानी आर्कियोलॉजिकल फाइंडिंग है जो शुरुआत में हमने किया था। और जो ये ग्रीन वाले दिखेंगे ये सिर्फ ये था कि 3 दिन की जो सर्वे में है करीब 150 के करीब नई साइट्स मिल गई, तो फिर इन्होंने जो सर्वे फिर से बंद कर दिया कि अभी नहीं करना, फिर देखेंगे नेक्स्ट महीना। सो जनरली वैसे ज्यादातर जो कार्विंग्स है कप मार्क्स वगैरह ही है। नेक्स्ट है ना सर। पर जो टूल्स में भी आप देखो तो टूल टेक्नोलॉजी आपकी काफी जो है पुरानी है। ज्यादातर जो है जो कहते हैं शार्प टूल जो है ये मिड पैलियोलिथिक से न्यूलिथिक वाले एरिया में जो उन्होंने यूज किया था। नेक्स्ट करना सर। प्रोटेक्शन के नाम पे टीएलपी की धारा 4 वाले जो एरिया है वो प्रोटेक्ट है, पर हरियाणा अरावली खासकर मानवबनी की हम बात करें तो उस एरिया में कोई नोटिफिकेशन लागू नहीं होती है, तो आज तक भी उनका जो स्टेटस डिसाइडेड कैटेगरी है। सर आगे लेना। मानवबनी जो है जो एनसीआर का सबसे अच्छा जंगल है, लेकिन गवर्नमेंट रिकॉर्ड में फॉरेस्ट नहीं है। नेक्स्ट है सर। तो अभी जो है इसको थोड़ा प्रिजर्व करने के लिए कुछ कोशिश में, जैसे एक हम यहाँ पे साइंटिफिक सर्वे जो खासकर हमारा कीस्टोन स्पीशीज को बेस में रख के कर रहे हैं, तो इसमें एक साइंस सर्वे था हमारा मेथड अभी जो पिछले 2 साल में। सर आगे लेना। तो इसमें हमने ग्रिड बना करके हिल को जो सर्वे किया था, और जनरली हमें नई ऑक्यूपेंसी जो मिली है कि हमने 81 ग्रिड जो सैंपल किए थे, जिसमें हमें लेपर्ड की जो खासकर प्रेजेंस है वो 56 ग्रिड मतलब ओवरऑल 75 to 80% एरियाज में जो है उसकी प्रेजेंस है। नेक्स्ट है ना सर। और काफी अच्छे जो है हमारे कैमरा का नंबर भी शो किया है जहाँ पे कि सेफ स्पेस भी दिख रहा है। आगे लेना सर। मेल साइटिंग्स, फीमेल साइटिंग्स, तो मतलब काफी अच्छा है यहाँ पे बैकग्राउंड की। खासकर अगर लेपर्ड की बात करें तो लेपर्ड का एक अच्छा जो हैबिटेट हम उसको आज की डेट में कह सकते हैं दिल्ली के बगल में। नेक्स्ट है सर। इसके अलावा उसमें मतलब दिल्ली भी आ गया, और इसके अलावा जो दूसरा स्पेसीज है हाइना, हाइना और भी स्पेशलिस्ट है, क्योंकि लेपर्ड जो है वो तो थोड़ा हर तरह के हैबिटेट में आपको मिलते हैं, पर हाइना जो है वो कुछ स्पेशल हैबिटेट में ही रहते हैं। और यहाँ का अगर हम देखें तो हमारे पास बहुत अच्छा खासा नंबर यहाँ हाइना का आया है, बहुत सारी साइटिंग्स आई है। और सबसे बड़ी बात है कि ये बहुत ह्यूमन डोमिनेटेड एरिया, यहाँ पे सेफ स्पेस या कोएग्जिस्टेंस का जो सिस्टम है वो बहुत अच्छे से आ रहा है, बिल्कुल दिल्ली के बगल में। सर आगे जी में। और इसके अलावा हमें जो डाइवर्स स्पीसीज में यहाँ पे विस्की स्पॉटेड कैट जो दुनिया की सबसे छोटी बिल्ली है, इसकी साइटिंग यहाँ मतलब पहली बार जो है मांगरबनी में साइटिंग थी। और अभी जो है यहाँ पे अब तक हम एंटीलोप में सिर्फ नीलगाय को कंसीडर करते हैं, पर इस रीजन में सांबर डियर जो है वो उसकी जो दो साइटिंग अपने आप में ये कह रही है कि डाइवर्सिटी जो है यहाँ पे काफी अच्छी बढ़ रही है। बाकी और स्पीसीज में है सर। नेक्स्ट ले लो। अ, ये काफी सारी जो चीजें हैं, जो हमारा ग्राफ है वो बढ़ रहा है। नेक्स्ट लेना सर। कोएग्जिस्टेंस भी मतलब लेपर्ड और ह्यूमन जो की कैमरे पे जाके फोटो खिंचवा रहे हैं। और नेक्स्ट। तो बेसिकली एक हमारा इसमें था कि हम सोशली वो भी देख रहे थे, तो जनरली यहाँ पे जो लोकल कम्युनिटीज है उनका लेपर्ड को लेकर के किस तरह का परसेप्शन है, तो उसमें कुछ हमने यहाँ पे सेमी स्ट्रक्चर्ड इंटरव्यू वो किए हैं। नेक्स्ट है सर। तो इसमें एक अच्छा जो चीज आई थी वो आई थी कि हमारे पास तीन कैटेगरी थी, जिनमें इंटरेक्शन के बेस पे कि जो लोगों के या तो नेगेटिव इंटरेक्शन होते हैं या न्यूट्रल है कि बस देखा है, या फिर पॉजिटिव इंटरेक्शन है। पर यहाँ पे देखने वाली बात ये थी कि जिन लोगों के साथ नेगेटिव इंटरेक्शन थे उनका व्यू जो था, वो परसेप्शन जो था वो ज्यादा पॉजिटिव था। नेक्स्ट लेना सर। थोड़ा शॉर्ट में कर लो। ह्यूमन वाइल्ड लाइफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट मतलब ठीक है अपनी जगह चल रहा है, बढ़ा दो। आ, तो थोड़े इंटरवेंशन सर। नेक्स्ट। और एक जो है लोकल कम्युनिटी को डायरेक्ट कनेक्ट करने के लिए हमारा जो है यहाँ पे हम 2015 से एक इको क्लब चला रहे हैं। तो इसका मोटिव यही था कि पुरानी जो कम्युनिटीज थी वो जंगल के साथ कनेक्ट थी, चाहे आस्था की वजह से चाहे अपने बिलीव की वजह से, तो वो जंगल बचाती थी। नई कम्युनिटी को जो है अब इंटरेस्ट नहीं रहा है, अर्बनाइजेशन की तरफ बढ़ रही है। तो ये हमारा हमारा मेन बेस है, हमारी जो पकड़ है कि हमें नई कम्युनिटी को जंगल के साथ कैसे जोड़ना है, और इसका अच्छा रिजल्ट भी हमें मिल रहा है। नेक्स्ट सर। और जो नई मतलब आसपास के और गांव में इस तरह की वर्कशॉप वगैरह। नेक्स्ट है ना सर। सो बेसिकली पता नहीं क्या होगा, कोशिश हमारी यही है, पर फ्यूचर एजेंडा लगभग यही है कि फॉरेस्ट कवर जो है उसको डीम्ड फॉरेस्ट वगैरह जो है प्रोटेक्ट कराया जाए। ये आपके सामने एजेंडा है, पता नहीं कितना होगा, हम पर बेस लेकर मतलब एक होप लेकर के चल रहे हैं। नेक्स्ट सर। थैंक यू।
Good evening, everybody. Today's topic, ecological consciousness in ancient India. Life then and now. There have been beautiful presentations, but I shall start with Mr. Harsana. What Mr. Harsana said about Khandaprasth, that reminded me of a term, the English coinage, originated from Delhi, but now common throughout the world. And the word is Cobra effect. It originated from Delhi. And how it originated has got a lot of concern with Khandaprasth. So now the word is in English, but I shall explain in Hindi. तो कुछ ऐसा हुआ हरसाना जी कि जब नए खंडक के बाद दोबारा दिल्ली बसाई अंग्रेजों ने, तो उस टाइम पे फॉरेस्ट काटे गए, कोबराज बहुत आ गए चारों तरफ से, अंग्रेज परेशान हो गए। तो अंग्रेजों ने एक रूल बनाया, पॉलिसी बनाई कि जो कोई भी एक कोबरा पकड़ा जाएगा उसको 1 सिल्वर का कॉइन दिया जाएगा। उस जमाने में सिल्वर कॉइन बहुत बड़ी रकम थी। कंडीशन थी यू मस्ट ब्रिंग कोबरा लाइव। दिल्ली वाले बड़े होशियार थे, इकोलॉजी समझ लिया उन्होंने, लोगों ने कोबरा पालना शुरू कर दिया। तो बजाय प्रॉब्लम घटने की ओर बढ़ गई, कोई एक आदमी कोबरा पाल ला, कभी 2-4 कोबरा निकल गए, आसपास प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट हो गई, तो उन्हें बड़ी मुश्किल हो गई। तो उन्होंने बिना सोचे समझे उस कोबरा फिर को स्कीम बंद कर दिया। अगले दिन लोगों ने क्या किया, अपने सब कोबरा छोड़ दिए, अब प्रॉब्लम और बढ़ गई। तो ये बात आई कि जब कभी भी इन्वायरमेंट की बात आए, मेक ए पॉलिसी which can withstand, which is long lasting, shouldn't be done in haste because you cannot play with the nature. तो इसे प्रॉब्लम दिल्ली से आई थी, लेकिन आज पूरी वर्ल्ड में जब कभी कोई पॉलिसी जल्दी बनती है जिसका इफेक्ट बड़ा डिस्ट्रक्टिव होता है, जैसे इट्स कोबरा इफेक्ट। तो इनकी बात से मुझे याद आ गया, सदन की जो बात आप कही खांडोपस की, तो उसी तरह की कुछ बात यहाँ बनी। और इसी से मुझे एक कहानी और याद आ गई। जब मैं अरुणाचल पोस्टेड था तो एक बड़ी अच्छी बात देखने मिली मुझे। जब शुरू में अंग्रेज अरुणाचल के रिमोट एरियाज में गए जहां केवल बुद्धिस्ट रह रहे थे, वहां जाते ही मच्छर कुछ ज्यादा थे, कुछ को मलेरिया हो गया। उन्होंने फौरन कहा, साहब वी मस्ट डू समथिंग अबाउट इट, दिस वेरी बैड, हाउ कैन यू लिव विद दैट। तो उनका साहब उसे जैसे रहने दिए, नो नो नो, वी कांट लिव थिंग्स लाइक दैट, समथिंग हैज टू बी डन अबाउट इट, नो नो। और वो गए, कोई डीडीटी उस टाइम जो भी दवाई रही वो वहां पर छिड़क दिया। जो लामा था उनका हेड, उसने कहा, नाउ वेट फॉर सम टाइम, यू आर प्लेइंग विद नेचर, नेचर शैल टेक रिवेंज। दे डिड नॉट बिलीव इट, बट आफ्टर 4 months ऑल द कैट्स ऑफ दैट एरिया डाइड। उन्होंने मच्छर मारे, ध्यान दीजिएगा, लेकिन मर गई बिल्लियां। और थोड़े दिन क्या हुआ, पूरे एरिया प्लेग फैल गया। अंग्रेज ऑफिसर went again. They said, now we have come another medicine. No, now we shall not play with the nature. They went down to other areas, so 50-60 kilometers, and they borrowed cats. बिल्लियां मांग के लाए, 6 महीने बिल्लियां वहां रखी, बिल्लियां अपने ब्रीड करते रहे, बिल्लियां बढ़ी, चूहे खत्म हुए, मच्छर वापस आ गए। Then they said कि this is balancing ecology. You cannot play with the nature. If you play with the nature, nature shall take revenge. And since time immemorial, we have been worshipping nature. And Ganti Murthy ji, they have shown one thing, Dani Polo. Dani Polo means they are worshipping sun, moon, and the nature. And they are very clear. You cannot play with nature. You have to worship, respect, and preserve nature as it is. As a result, they have got a system which we can't think of. वहां किसी के हड्डी टूट जाए, वो जाएगा कोई थोड़ी सी, बताते नहीं कौन सी लाए, कुछ पत्ते लाएगा, बांधेगा और हड्डी ठीक हो जाती है। I have seen it from my own eyes and I couldn't believe it. How is it possible? The Jarvas living in Andamans, they preserve the fire. How? We can't think of. Andaman, it rains 10 months in a year. Only 2 months there are no rains. Or 10 months it keeps on raining. And still Jarvas preserve the fire. Open रहते हैं. They don't have houses. और जहां जाते हैं जल्दी से आग जला ली. Unbelievable. No matchstick, no system. They are drenched in the rain. Still, whenever they need, they immediately produce fire. Somebody asked, what do you do? We respect nature. We worship fire and fire with us. So unless we go back to that system, that we keep on worshipping nature. I'm reminded of another story. Once King Bali asked Guru Shukracharya, what is good and what is bad in this world? He said, look, it's your perception only. And he says, Amantram Aksharam Nasti. There is no letter which cannot be used as a mantra. If you don't know, it's your fault. Nasti Mulam Anoshadam. There is no tree, no shrub, no plant which is used as. Everything can be used as medicine. If you don't know, it's your fault. You learn it. And again he says, Ayogi Purso Nasti. Yojka Tadurlabha. Everybody is competent. You don't know how to take work from him. If there is a good manager, everybody can make work. So that is system. Gati Murthy, when he started, he was talking about the science and the super science. What I mean by super science, the real science, the science which can elevate us. That is why in Vedas we say very categorically, ki vidyam cha avidyam cha, yastad vedo hemsa. You have to reach the physical sciences as well as spiritual sciences. Through physical sciences, you can elevate your physical life. But through the spiritual sciences, you know how to understand nature, how to live peacefully in nature. So unless you know that, you can never be happy. In our own system, what we say, Ravi, you're here? Next. I didn't know you have come. इसको बाद में लगा हाँ इसमें नहीं कम what Bhagavan just said कि ज्ञान विज्ञान सहितम, that you have to learn the science and the spiritual science both together. Yat gyatva moksha ashubhat. Only then you can out of all this rut. Without physical sciences, you cannot live happily. But only this will not suffice. You have to learn how to understand nature and how along the nature you can go ahead. When Professor Jain was giving his, I was very happy. What he has said, that you go the first step. And the first step is all those things which are the plants, this thing. And man starts only thereafter, which are all the five senses. And after five senses, those same chakras start. That's why we say 5 downwards, 7 upwards, and 2 more. That's how 14 lokas are there. So basic thing is how to appreciate the nature. Once you appreciate it, understood properly, only then you can think of understanding yourself. What is happening nowadays? We try to understand, appreciate others, but we have not understood what we are. It's very interesting thing now the science confirms, but we have been reading it. In our own body, there are 3 lokas. 7 की बात बाद में करूंगा. First, Mrityulok, and that is only from Muladhara to Swadhisthana. These 2 chakras comprise your Mrityulok. And जहां तक आपकी अर्थ की ग्रेविटेशनल पुल है, यानी आप कोई चीज फेंकिए वापस आएगी, दैट इज नोन एज भूलोक. उसके बाद में दूसरा बेल्ट आती है जहां पे नाइदर अर्थ की ग्रेविटेशनल पुल काम करेगी न सन की काम की, फ्री बेल्ट, एंड दैट इज योर अंतरिक्ष. एंड दैट इज व्हाट योर अनाहत, sorry, Manipur, Anahat, and Vishuddha chakras. And thereafter, sun's gravitational pull starts. That is third form. So Indians have been knowing all this, and knowing that only, they knew which plant was where. Every plant you can't grow everywhere. And every sort of this cattle or animal, you can't keep everywhere. Unfortunately, we have started having Jews. And zoo में आप लाके कोई जानवर कह दिया, but don't know how much he is suffering now, poor fellow. बहुत ही ठंडे मुल्क प्राणी है, अल्लाह के दिल्ली गर्मी में रख दिया उसने. अब आपसे बेसिक कुछ भी करिए, he can never be happy. You have never understood his plight. Another thing, which Jain Sahib was saying, and Murthy also said the same thing, and same was repeated by Madam also. Beauty is in our trying to be more and more modern. We have forgotten our past. One thing good happened, because every crisis is an opportunity. During Corona, we learned a couple of lessons. अगर आपको याद हो कोरोना पीरियड दिल्ली की पूरी एयर पॉल्यूशन फ्री हो गई थी आफ्टर 1 month. Why? We learned how to appreciate and respect nature. उसके पहले जो चीज हमारे घर में बताई जाती थी उनको हमने यूज करना बंद कर दिया था. आप मार्केट जाते हैं, उन्होंने कहा जिंजर एले हैप्पी ले लिया, लेकिन घर में कहा था भाई अदरक के पी लो, उसमें बड़ी तकलीफ होती लोगों को. पहले चोट लगती थी, आपको दूध में हल्दी मिला के पिला दिया गर्म करके, बड़ा बुरा लगता था. ना ना ना, मार्केट गए स्टारबक्स में और वहां पे टर्मरिक लाते, ओह गिव इट मी. व्हाट इज दिस? बट कोरोना टोल्ड अस नो नो, if you go back to nature and go back to our ancient lifestyle, there's so many things which we can do while living in this modern world. 5 things have been categorized in our life, and these are all available except one, in your kitchen, but we don't respect those. Malathas में नीम, अब आपको किचन में आपकी नींद नहीं आएगा, सो फॉरगेट दैट। लेकिन उसके अलावा 4 पॉइंट आपके हर घर में होते हैं, एक्सेप्ट दोज हु आर टोटल वैष्णव, दे डोंट ईट इट। द फर्स्ट इज हल्दी, मस्टर्ड, अदरक एंड लहसुन, गार्लिक। आपको some don't use, then I tell them there was time when eating onion and garlic was prohibited, but then we are living in a pollution free life. Now there's so much pollution. If you take garlic and onion, there's no harm in it. But these 4 things are available in every household, but we don't eat those properly. The way it has been said, आपको जुकाम हो रहा है, आपको शहर में वो अदरक करके गर्म करके पीने में तकलीफ होती है, बट बाहर जा करके जिंजर एले में बड़ा मजा आता है, उसको हम लेते हैं। तो दिस थिंग यू हैव टू कम आउट ऑफ इट, you have to understand, appreciate. I'm sorry we are getting late because 5 o'clock we are supposed to wind up. But couple of things which I noticed, and I'll say more, little bit more. One thing more, this was said by Professor Jain and Murthy both, that all living and non-living, they are connected. As I said earlier, आपने एक मच्छर एरिया से हटा दिया तो बिल्लियां चली जाएंगी। एंड दिस एक्सपेरिमेंट हैज डन नंबर ऑफ टाइम्स। किसी पर्टिकुलर एरिया से आप कोई एक आइटम हटा दीजिए, आप देखें दूसरा आइटम अपना खत्म हो जाएगा, और ऐसा खत्म होगा, उसका इतना बड़ा इंपैक्ट होगा आपकी लाइफ, यू कैन नॉट थिंक ऑफ। पूरी लाइफ टॉप सीटर भी हो जाएगी। सो यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड एवरीथिंग इज को एग्जिस्टिंग नेचर, एंड दैट को एग्जिस्टेंस शुड नॉट बी डिस्टर्ब्ड। दैट वाज द एंशिएंट थॉट। एक और चीज ध्यान देनी रखें, वी हैव टू लर्न फ्रॉम द नेचर एंड फ्रॉम द एनिमल्स बोथ। आपको शायद ताज्जुब होगा, इंसान अकेला ऐसा एक प्राणी है जिसकी अपनी कोई भाषा नहीं है। आप गाय लीजिए, इंडिया की हो, चाइना की हो, अमेरिका की हो, उसकी एक ही बोली होगी, कोई उसमें फर्क नहीं होगा। डॉग लीजिए, आपका इंडिया को हो, पाकिस्तान को हो, अगर कंट्री झगड़ा हो रहा होगा, लेकिन उनकी बोली एक ही होगी। लेकिन इंसान, क्या उसकी एक बोली है? एज ए मैटर ऑफ फैक्ट, इंसान की कोई बोली नहीं है। कई एक्सपेरिमेंट किए गए हैं, राजा में छोटे बच्चे लेकर के जानवर बीच रख दिया गया, बड़ा होकर बच्चा जानवर जैसा ही हो गया। दैट मीन्स हम ही लोग ऐसे हैं जिनको लगातार सीखने की जरूरत होती है। आप हिरन का बच्चा देखिए, पैदा होगा, थोड़ा सा चोट पड़ेगा, जाने कैसे जाता है, क्या करना है, उसको कोई सिखाता नहीं है। आप भैया के बच्चे देखिए, भैया अंडे देके चली जाएगी, बच्चे बड़े होंगे, घोंसला छोड़ देगी, और बहुत ही आर्टिस्टिक घोंसला होता है भैया का, कभी देखा होगा आप लोगों ने। उसके बच्चे बड़े होते, वो ऐसा ही सिमिलर घोंसला बनाते। कौन सिखा रहा उनको? उनका एक इनबिल्ट टेंडेंसी है टू लर्न फ्रॉम नेचर, उनके जीन्स में इंफॉर्मेशन है। लेकिन हमारे घर में अगर हमारे फोर फादर्स मकान बनाया था, अगर हमको सिखाया नहीं गया तो हम नहीं बना सकते। एक एक्सपेरिमेंट किया गया, मैं अंडमान में था, बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है। अंडमान की लैंड में न्यूजीलैंड के और ऑस्ट्रेलिया दोनों के कछुए आते हैं, अंडे देते चले जाते हैं, और बड़ा स्ट्रेंज चीज देखी गई, जो उसके बच्चे निकलते हैं, जो अंडमान के, वो सॉरी न्यूजीलैंड बच्चा है कछुए का, वो न्यूजीलैंड जाएगा वापस, और ऑस्ट्रेलिया वाला ऑस्ट्रेलिया जाएगा। पीपल couldn't believe. As the luck would have been, I was there at that time. Certain scientists came. There is no, we shall test it. और उन्होंने एक एक मैग्नेट लगा दिया उनके सर पे, कछुओं के, जैसे बच्चे बड़े हुए। And surprisingly, they kept on going here and there about a month. But after 1 month, जो न्यूजीलैंड वाला था न्यूजीलैंड पहुंच गया, ऑस्ट्रेलिया पहुंच गया। तो कौन को सिखा रहा है? They are continuously learning from nature. तो अगर ये चीज इंसान को आ जाए कि हम भी नेचर सीखना शुरू कर दें, हमारी सब प्रॉब्लम सॉर्ट आउट हो जाए। लेकिन हमारी प्रॉब्लम है, हम सीखना नहीं चाहते, और इसी वजह से लैंग्वेजेस डिफरेंट है, कल्चर्स डिफरेंट है, स्टाइल्स डिफरेंट हैं। अदरवाइज जितनी एनिमल वर्ल्ड है, कहीं कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं आती। जो हाथी का बच्चा हाथी जैसे रहेगा, अकेला रहे, सबके बीच रहे, he shall never forget his traits, but we forget. So only requirement is we must go back to our ancient style while being modern. I'm not against being modern. You don't use mobile, जैसे मैंने अच्छी बात कही, मोबाइल यूज करो, लेकिन देखो जहां तक हो करो उसको भाई, डोंट मेक वेस्टेज। मैंने आपको पॉइंट नोट किए सातों, हाउ टू रिसाइकिल, रीयूज, रीथिंक, बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट है। They need to do that. बट एट द सेम टाइम अपनी एंशिएंट स्टाइल को धीरे धीरे करके आपने वापस लाइफ में लाना है, सीखना है कैसे कैसे क्या करना है हमने. If you want to quote, there are so many instances of Rigved which says respect nature. और बड़ी मजे वाली से नेचर को रिस्पेक्ट नहीं करेंगे अल्टीमेटली होगा क्या है. गीता में एक बड़ी अच्छी बात कही गई है कि अन्नाद भवन्ति भूतानि, ये शरीर पैदा हुआ अन्न से होता है. ये अन्न कहाँ से आता है? पर्जन्याद अन्न संभवा. लेकिन पर्जन्य कैसे आता है? वर्षा कहाँ से होती है? लंबी कहानी में गीता की लोग छोड़ रहा हूं बीच में, लेकिन वर्षा तभी तो होगी जब तक हम नेचर को रिस्पेक्ट करते रहेंगे. अगर नेचर की रिस्पेक्ट खत्म करेंगे क्या होगा? आज दुबई बाढ़ आने लगती है और हमारे पंजाब में सूखा पड़ने लगता है. क्यों हो रहा है? वी आर डिस्टर्बिंग नेचर. अनलेस वी गो बैक टू अवर एंशिएंट स्टाइल, वी शैल बी डिस्टर्बिंग आवरसेल्फ. लगातार ग्लोबल वार्मिंग बढ़ रही है. अभी सिर्फ वार्निंग सिग्नल्स आ रहे हैं. क्या कारण पहले नहीं होता था? पहले जब कोई जितना जरूरत उतना लिया, बाकी छोड़ दिया गया. अभी जैसे बता रहे थे कि बड़ी खुशी वाली बात है कि लेपर्ड को साइट किया गया. ये खुशी बात नहीं होनी चाहिए थी, हमें उसकी हैबिटेट को छोड़ देना चाहिए था, बट नहीं छोड़ा हमने. एज ए रिजल्ट वो बेचारा ह्यूमन हैबिटेशन में आ रहा है, कहीं मारा जा रहा है, एंड वी आर डिस्टर्बिंग नेचर कंटिन्यूअसली. कहने मुझे बहुत था, लेकिन मैं देख रहा हूँ 5:24 हो चुका है. I was supposed to wind up by 5 o'clock. It's my mistake. I couldn't control things better. So therefore, और उसके बाद सुना आपने शायद चाय वगैरह पिलाई जाएगी और कहते क्षुधा तुरणाम ने बलम बुद्धि. जब पता हो इसके ये कार्यक्रम होने वाला है तो बल बुद्धि बेकार हो जाती है. So therefore, I stop here. And as a result, since we are late, so no question answers. Ganti Murthy जी आपको बहुत धन्यवाद. But no question answers. So you can relax now. Take your another assignment. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, sir. Namaste.
Thank you so much, everyone, for hearing so patiently, and thanks to all the dignitaries for sharing their valuable insights. Since gratitude is considered not only the greatest of the virtues, but the parent of all others, I would like to invite the coordinator of Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, Dr. Komal Agarwal, to propose the formal vote of thanks. I would like to invite Harvinder sir to propose the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to extend this word of thanks to our esteemed panelists, Professor A.B. Shukla ji, Professor Ganti Murthy ji, Professor Pankaj Jain ji, Madam Suparna Diwakar ji, and Sunil Harsana ji. And we are really enlightened to know these fine details of our environment, our ecosystem, how it functions, and how it is very much dependent on the existence of every species. Each species, doesn't matter how small they are very much important for our survival, as ma'am has beautifully explained the case of bee, that they are very much important for food production across the world. And again, since the mentioning of bee came here in this discussion, so I would like to share one fact with you people, that how many of you know about the Morgan Freeman, the Hollywood actor? The Morgan Freeman, you know about him? So Morgan Freeman has significantly donated a piece of land just for bee culture in the US. And again, I'm putting the name of Morgan Freeman with an intention here, because one of our panelists, Professor Pankaj Jain, has shared the TV screen with the Morgan Freeman. He was with him in an interview, a documentary, The Existence of Goat, in the year 2019. So hence, I feel we are very fortunate to hear from all of them. We have learned a lot from of them. And again, this fortune is extended to our students, to our other faculty members. And at the very end, it could not have been possible without the patronage of our patron and Honorable Principal Sir. With him and with his constant support only, we are able to achieve this feat, or we are able to organize this given seminar. And last but not the least, our beautiful students who sat along this entire duration of seminar. And I hope they must have learned, they must have enjoyed this wonderful session. Keep on coming, keep on gracing the skies. Good evening.
I request everyone to please rise up and come forward for a group photograph. अच्छा एक गैस का ले लीजिए फिर बच्चों के साथ
सही आ जाओ
प्लीज कम
इंजेक्शन हो जाएगा लंबे आप पीछे जा सकते
I think we can come ऐसे दो रोड पे ना कम हाइट वाले आते हैं आ जाएंगे तब आ जाए हाँ आ जाएंगे कम Thank you. With the students as well.